Thank you. Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Steffi. And I have to say that, like that previous session, you've got people from London. I ride my bike past that zoo every morning on my way to work. I had no idea what was going on there. But I come to Munich, and you've discovered them. So these are great stories. So thank you for that. Really great stories. Sebastian, I think we have to use an English colloquialism, address the elephant in the room, which is not an elephant, it's an octopus.
It's an octopus.
Tell us a little bit about this.
So we're Octopus Energy. We're an energy provider for renewable energy. So that's part of what we do to save the climate. But we also have a special cooperation here in Germany with a company called Everwave, which clean rivers and oceans, rivers and lakes worldwide, so that plastic and trash doesn't end up in the ocean. And customers that sign up for energy tariffs with Octopus Energy here in Germany can opt in to have €2 of their monthly bill donated to Everwave to clean up the rivers. And so far, our customers have donated enough to clean 55,000 kilograms of plastic out of rivers and lakes. And part of that we took and we gave it to art students to sort of recycle into something that is more than just trash, which is they built us this is one of them, 2 little octopuses that we have in our offices.
That's great, and whoever built that has definitely got some talent. So I think really just thinking about the energy transition, thinking about some of the conversations we've been having today, there's a real clarity around the idea of this interconnectivity of natural systems and the need for us all to put them back in balance. And obviously the energy transition is absolutely crucial of that. So I'd love to get a sense for you just at the beginning. Let's have an overview. Like, what role do renewable energy projects currently play reducing the environmental harms and regenerating nature compared to traditional sources, compared to fossil fuels?
To be honest, I mean, I think it's the game changer. And for us, at least, it's like one of the most important building blocks. We come from a situation where energy was always produced by literally burning stuff, which generates tons of emissions. But it's not just that. It's previously, most of the way how we generated electricity has been sort of against nature. We rip holes into the ground, we pull stuff out, we dig, we frack, we destroy. We build long pipelines across countries, destroying wildlife, to pump gas or whatever across nations, to then finally at some place build huge hunking power stations that day and night burn whatever fossil fuel it is that's delivered, and emitting tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. Now, in comparison with renewable energies, we're focusing on generating electricity with nature, in accordance with nature. So when the wind blows, we harness that power. When the sun shines, we harness it. When water is flowing, we can harness that energy without having to destroy anything. So it's really interesting to see how we're working with the rhythm of nature rather than against it. And just to give you a small, like a factoid or a small number, is like in 2023, renewable energies reduced CO2 emissions by 250 million tons, which is roughly the equivalent of the annual emissions of 55 million cars driving around.
So I think the word transition is really crucial here, where, you know, the bottom line is, sadly, we are going to have to continue to burn fossil fuels for some time. I'm just interested in getting your thoughts on, like, these very complex trade-offs that that we have to tackle. How do you balance that, the obvious urgent need for renewable energy infrastructure, as you mentioned, wind, solar, water, with concerns about biodiversity and land use as well?
Yeah. So I think the key point here is balance. We need to make sure that we don't over-invest or to build too much of something in an area. But I think, on the other hand, it's always really important to remember that, as I just pointed out, it's an alternative to something that's already there.
Yeah.
So for every wind turbine we don't build and every solar panel we don't put somewhere, there's a gas power plant, or even worse, a coal power plant running day and night to generate that energy.
Yeah.
So shifting away from that is already helping the environment heal by an order of magnitude. And also putting up a wind turbine in an area is far less aggressive to nature than building a power plant or anything similar like that. So I think that in itself is sort of the solution to the question. We're substituting something that's actively hurting nature and biodiversity by something that is working in accordance with it.
So we're seeing, with the panel before, I thought was fascinating the way that they were collecting data, those data points about the natural world. I know that Octopus runs a tech platform basically based on machine learning and very high quality data called Kraken. Obviously, nature provides us with a lot of data points. How do you think about those? How are you using those, I guess?
I think it's one of the most important ways of how the energy transition is going to work. What's really going to be interesting is that we come from an energy source that we can turn on and turn off as we want to, in a sense, into an energy source that when the wind blows, there's a lot of green energy when the sun shines.
Yeah.
So we need to take a lot of these data points to produce a model that brings consumption into accordance with generation. And that is harder than it sounds in the beginning. So for instance, we have a tariff that we call Intelligent Octopus Go. It's a charging tariff for your EV. And we literally take thousands or even millions of data points into account on when we actually charge your electric vehicle. So we take into account like how is the wind and solar generation at this moment, this time? What is the prognosis for weather going forward? Because if you have your car sitting at home for the next 84 hours and you're not using it, it makes a huge difference. Do we charge it right now, or do we charge it in 10 or 20 hours, depending on how the weather is changing and how energy production will change? Is there a lot of green energy? Is there a lot of other use happening in the grid? To balance all of this, we use our tech platform to then optimize the charging rhythm of your car to how the energy is produced, to not need additional power plants to be turned on in case we have an over and under production of green energy.
So one of the great challenges that we face over the next sort of 20 years is enormous amounts of urban cities being built in places really that are going to sort of like damage nature and damage ecosystems. One of the ways I think that we can probably really sort of tackle the challenges that we face here is like by retrofitting, right? We already have a lot of infrastructure. It's a very important part of the energy transition, taking an existing building, making it more efficient, making it more sustainable. Can you talk a little bit about approaches you have towards that and how that can really have a positive impact from an environmental perspective?
It's really interesting. There's several points. One thing I'd like to point out is one of the things that when you talk about retrofitting is switching a gas boiler or oil heating to a heat pump.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, there's an understanding that only works in very new or even new built homes because of insulation standards. The fact is, these new technologies like a heat pump also work perfectly well in existing infrastructures. So we've just recently installed a heat pump in a house from 1860, and it runs perfectly fine. The house is home, and they're even saving on their energy costs. Now, we also take this a step further. We have a product that we call Zero Bills, which is all about people living in homes where they have €0 or pound energy bills in the future. It means they have PV on the roof, they have a battery for storage, they have a heat pump for heating, smart meter, and our tech sort of optimizes everything that we can guarantee the customer you're not paying anything for energy bills. That works very well on on new buildings, but we're also now rolling this out in Germany on existing buildings with retrofit. So we don't need to go and build new buildings. We don't need to seal up new areas for this new energy tech. We can integrate it into existing housing stock.
Now, you mentioned heat pumps. Big challenges around deployment of those. I mean, they're costly. Certainly, I don't know if it's the same in Germany. In the UK, we don't have enough people who are trained to install them. Yeah. That's a big opportunity, obviously. How do we make them more accessible? How do we make them more available to people? I think one of the challenges that we face is the fact that there is this kind of bit of a narrative developing that they're not for everyone, that they're for kind of like an elite, almost like an iPhone was for people who were, you know, an elite. How do we make them accessible and make everyone feel like they can have one of these in their homes?
So first of all, heat pumps are super important. Roughly 60% of household or residential emissions come from heating. So switching to a heat pump with renewable energy reduces those emissions drastically. Right now there is this concern. People think it's a tech that's only for some people. What we need to do is reduce the cost of the heat pump drastically. Because right now the heat pump is more efficient than any form of fossil heating. You take one unit of electricity and the heat pump will turn it into 4 units of heating energy, where if you burn anything, it's at maximum, if you're lucky, a 1-to-1 ratio.
Right.
So straight away, it's more effective. But then second of all, right now, the tech in heat pump is still expensive. In Germany, a heat pump may run you for 30,000 euros. After government funding, it may be 15,000. So there's a lot of people who don't have that kind of money. They have 5,000 euros, and they need a new heating system. They're going to get a gas boiler. Yeah. So our approach is to do exactly what you just said, is take the technological scaling that happens with technology and hypercharge this. So we built a heat pump factory in the UK where we tackled exactly this problem, where from the ground up we designed a heat pump with the goal to be producible at scale, to be cheaper, more enduring, and easier for maintenance. And they're already building and installing these heat pumps in the UK. We're hoping to get these in Germany soon, but the price difference is staggering. So in the UK, a heat pump will run you roughly 15,000 euros or pounds after government funding. Our heat pump is around 3,000, and there's certain areas where, depending on the funding, it is actually £0 to install the heat pump for the customer.
Right.
And then it's a real alternative to gas heating for everyone, and not just for someone who's rich enough to afford it.
You mentioned subsidies with the heat pumps. Subsidies, so the government funding. What policy? Most countries are actually failing to reach the agreed Paris Agreement targets. What policies do you think we need to put in place in order to accelerate this transition? What are we missing here?
Well, there's one, especially in Germany, I can say we're missing one crucial infrastructure, which is the smart meter, the intelligent system at home that measures how much energy you're consuming at a given point in time. And why is this so important? Because the future is all about the flexibility of renewable energy. There's times when there's a lot available, because it's very windy and sunny, and when there isn't. Now, if we try to sort of buffer this with conventional energy by fossil fuels, the energy transition will take far longer and will cost us millions and billions more. But if instead we are able to use this flexibility and get consumption to adjust to production, so whenever the energy is abundant, it needs to be cheap and even free for people to use. While if there's not enough, it needs to be more expensive, and we need to have the tech to sort of shift the load that we have for electric vehicles, for heating and other gadgets at the home into those times. But in Germany and other nations, especially that technology of smart meters isn't readily available.
Can I ask why? It's pretty readily available in many other countries.
It's very interesting. We have a lot of discussions with politicians around this, and they're always really surprised that in Germany we've took a very German path of creating the most sophisticated piece of technology that we could think of. Okay. That makes it exceptionally hard and expensive to install it in homes. It's over-engineered, basically.
Okay. That makes sense. So I want to look ahead a little bit. You're very, obviously, as a company, I think that you're very optimistic and you're very kind of can-do as a group of people. And I know Greg, the CEO of Octopus. He's an extraordinary man. I'd love to get a sense of what innovations, what technologies you see coming over the horizon that you really feel are going to align with the energy transition and nature conservation and biodiversity goals. What are you excited about?
It's really the concept of flexibility. It's the idea that green, renewable energy is the cheapest energy source we have today, and it's getting cheaper every year. So moving forward, we'll have an abundance of energy that is going to be free at some point, that doesn't have any emissions, and now it's really up to us to use technology and develop really smart products that harness this power to the maximum. And looking at what we do with houses where you don't pay for energy anymore, cars that charge at exceptionally low rates by optimizing towards all of these data points, and looking at other companies who do similar, very creative approaches, I'm super excited about a future where we really don't need to turn off any fossil fuel power stations to manage our energy load, but it will just be generated by wind and solar alone, and it will be free for nearly everyone.
Well, that's a very exciting prospect. Just to round off, I've got also another exciting prospect, which is if you happen to be in Berlin on October the 10th, do please come and join us. We're running an event, a wide event, on how we harness the technology we already have, as well as breakthrough technology to accelerate the energy transition. If you'd like to come, just hit me up and I'll help you out. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Bastian.
Thank you. Very nice.